Welcome, familia. This is the Found in Translation talk show, the talk show that stacks truth of politics and today's hottest issues from a diverse perspective. Again, this is your host, servidor, Ray Collazo, and I think it's very appropriate in this Dignity in All Forms edition of Found in Translation to begin with a poem by the great New Yorican poet, Pedro Pietri, who influenced my life quite a bit, and I'm sure many people watching the Found in Translation talk show as we speak today. Juan, Milagros, Miguel, Olga, Manuel all died yesterday, today, and will die tomorrow again, passing their bill collectors on to the next of kin. All died waiting for the Garden of Eden to open up again under a new management. All died dreaming about America, waking up in the middle of the night screaming, "Mira, mira, your name is on the winning lottery ticket for $100,000. All died hating the grocery stores that sold them make-believe steak and bulletproof rice and beans. All died waiting, dreaming, and hating." And I bring up that poem by the great New Yorican poet Pedro Pietri, really an excerpt from the seminal poem of New Yorican literature, because words matter. Our voices matter. Our stories matter. And it matters also who tells our stories, how authentic our stories are told, and how our stories are distributed not only amongst our own community, but across all communities so people understand the richness and the humanity of all of us. And so we're going to talk later in the show about the legacy of Kobe Bryant and really the aftermath of this incredible tragedy, which hit us on many levels I don't think we really were prepared for. And the Super Bowl preview with our great from Nuts and Bolts Sports Podcast, the Sports Whisperer himself, Monte Perez. You'll hear also later in the show my political analysis of really this pivotal moment in our history where we're clinging on to the Constitution in our democracy by a very thin thread, and other political headlines. But we're going to take the first segment of the show to really talk about what's been a emerging controversy around the new book that's been published. That's gotten a lot of attention and a lot of pushback by many of our friends in literature, and really speaks to this larger question around how the humanity, the history, the culture, and quite honestly, the voice of the Latinx community is thought about, shared, and discussed, in this case, in literature. So we wanted to bring on a new friend to the show, author, academic translator, and an activist that's gotten very involved in the hashtag Dignidad Literaria movement. David Bowles, welcome to Found in Translation, brother.
Hey, I'm happy to be here, hermano. It's a pleasure and an honor to continue talking about, the things that we're doing to support literary dignity for Latinx people.
Absolutely, David. So we really appreciate you calling from one of the beautiful parts of our community. The what I tell my homies is the real valley, the Rio Grande Valley down into deep South Texas. Of course, Our friends in San Fernando Valley outside of LA, and our friends in the ag sector of California, and even in Phoenix may have a debate about that. But if money,
especially
the valley.
We have no mountains. This is flat. It's over a river delta, but it's el valle.
Seguro que sí. The valley, for my money, is deep in South Texas. Much love to our friends in Tejas. So, David, for folks that have been following this, sort of a new book that rarely in the major publishing scene has a Latin theme, has come out. And has gotten a lot of love from people that we may not even expected would have given this kind of attention. So why don't you just lay out for people that haven't been following this issue closely, that has spurned the Dignidad Literaria movement, what has happened in the last few weeks that has caused this renewed conversation and activism amongst our friends in the Latinx lit community?
Sure. So, if we back up a year or so, Flatiron Books, which is a division of Macmillan, an imprint of Macmillan, one of the big five publishers, announced that it was going to be publishing a book called American Dirt by Janine Cummins. And the PR machine kind of began to ratchet up at that point, because the book was being kind of positioned as the book about immigration, Mexico, the border experience, and so forth. And remember, this was at the very, very height, although it feels like we're at the height of it right now, the very height of the immigration crisis as caused by Trump and his immigration policies. And seeing children in cages and families being separated was definitely something that was wearing at the national conscience. So about November or so, we began to see articles, interviews with Jeanine Cummins, and some of us began to notice something kind of off about the conversation. People began to dig into her a little bit and think about her perspective and who she was, a marginally Latina woman, grandmother from Puerto Rico, but who had identified as white all her life and had never written about Latinx issues, taking on something as significant as this. So it was on people's radar. And in December, Miriam Gurba, a Chicana writer from California, who has just got a tremendous, very unique voice that she raises in solidarity and support of her sisters and brothers, siblings in the community, was commissioned to write a review for Miss Magazine of this book. And so she got an advanced review copy, read it, and just was floored by how very, very bad it was. Mediocre writing, kind of a boilerplate Hollywood B-movie plot that moved just fine and, was nothing to write home about. That would have been fine had it not been about Mexico, a place that Miriam's family came from, and had it not gotten everything about Mexico and about Mexican people wrong, even down to flattening geography and getting the language wrong, not using Mexican Spanish correctly. And she wrote a bad review and it was rejected. So she then went on to post that review on a different on a website, and that began this kind of conversation on social media around what she had said. I reached out to a friend who had an advanced review copy and read it, and then I wrote a review as well. And in the days leading up to when the book was published, we were being very vocal about how problematic it was. And then the book came out, and it was selected by Oprah to be part of her book club. And that was when things really hit the fan, and people began to push back against it in earnest. As more people read it, as more people began to trust what we were saying, but also confirm it through their own reading, we began to pull on the threads of the story and realize that it was a setup. The whole book and its success and so forth had been pre-planned. You take a moment, kind of a pivotal moment in the national consciousness. You throw $1 million because this woman got a 7-figure advance, which is $1 million or more. Throw $1 million at a woman to write a book. Oprah has an imprint with Flatiron. She's published multiple books with them. She's good friends with Bob Miller, the guy who runs it. And they, behind the scenes, behind closed doors, basically they crowned this book a success. They decided that it was going to be the book of the year. And one of the most distressing developments, the McAllen Public Library was awarded like a grant from the Oprah's book club, which was relaunching with a TV component as well this year. And they were super excited about it. They're going to get a bunch of free books, but they weren't told what the title was. Then they were told the books are going to come in. This was Friday, January 17th. We want you to unbox the books, take video of yourselves, and then send it to us. And they opened the boxes and they saw that it was American Dirt. Now, they are mostly Latinx librarians who were very plugged into the conversation that was already going on at the time, and they were appalled. And the librarian there, after a lot of thought, decided to send the books back. And this is what, this confluence of things began to blow up on social media. So we started the hashtag Dignidad Literaria because we were like, if no one else is going to listen to our voices, if somebody, an outsider, can come in and be paid millions of dollars to write our story, while other writers who have written our story, make measly amounts of money and get no publicity, then maybe we need to take matters in our own hand and lift our voices ourselves.
Absolutely. And we're going to get to what has now been spurned on as culminating in the Dignidad Literaria movement that you and Maida and the rest of your activist community has spurred on. And so we're going to talk about how we can proactively raise our voices, tell our stories, and support not only our literature, but our writers. And again, you're listening to David Bowles, activist, a writer, from South Texas, a translator. So you're very engaged in translating Mexican indigenous languages. Very fascinating area of scholarship. And Ray Collazo here on Found Translation, talking about this new book, American Dirt, which has been, as David's chronicling, has been celebrated sort of in the mainstream big publishing world, to the point where it's in the Oprah Book Club, and the politics of that and the significance of that, and Oprah's influence in literature, and how this happens on the heels of sort of within this political climate, a book that, quite honestly, tells from everything that our friends are reviewing, a very sort of stereotypical, one-sided Narcos Netflix kind of perspective on the Latino community. So what you're telling me here, David, is there's several things wrong, because part of the critique you've gotten online is, well, you're criticizing her because she's not Hispanic. You're criticizing her because, there are because she's talking about sort of the immigrant journey. Maybe you're jealous because she made all this money writing this book. So what I'm hearing is that it's really a combination of all of these things that seem like not only the writer, Oprah, the publishing world, not only is out of touch with sort of, it misses the mark from a literary critique perspective, but it really opens up this wound around, well, this is, one of the few opportunities the mainstream publishing world gives us a chance to tell a story from our community.
Yeah, the one story they want to hear, right?
And it's the one story they want to hear, and it's the one story
that they found stolen from.
Well, I'm going to get to that in a second. Yeah. That would be entertaining to them, because what I've heard is that it's very much like, well, if it was just, take the ethnicity out of it, it was just a Harlequin novel romantic thriller.
Basically, yeah.
That would be one thing, but it's almost like this is, as you said, this is a story other people want to hear about us. Can you share about why you feel that way?
Sure. Well, one of the things you have to keep in mind, Ray, is that thousands of books are published every year in the United States, tens of thousands of books. And of those books, I mean, Latinx people make up 18% of the population. We represent about 3% of the authors every year. We don't get a lot of books published. It's really, really hard to get past gatekeepers and get your manuscript into the hand of agents and then editors and finally published. And when they're published, it's very hard to get all of those publicity dollars invested in promoting your book in the way that this book has been promoted, which is one of the reasons that, I mean, I don't have any problem with somebody who's not Mexican or not Mexican American writing about Mexican American or Mexican culture. If they do the work, they can contribute to the conversation. I think that it's perfectly fine, but it takes a lot of work for an outsider who's not from Mexico and has no connection to the Mexican culture to come in and do a good job. It takes a lot of research. And of course, Janine Cummins says that she researched for 5 years, but frankly, that's not reflected in the work that she's done. We talk a lot in kids lit, and that's my area. I write books mainly for children, for teens, although sometimes for adults as well. We talk about the fact that we need good representation, and good representation is best authored by authentic voices, own voices, as we say, the hashtag own voices. But we can have outsiders come in if they do the work. There's this really, really great saying that we have in Kidlit. It comes from Debbie Reese, who's a Nambe Pueblo scholar of children's literature. She talks about you can write about a culture well if that culture allows you to hold its babies. If people from that culture trust you with their children, that means that you have been accepted as an ally to the degree that you know them well enough to write about them. If not, I don't know, maybe you should ask yourself whether that makes sense for you to be telling that story. Maybe it's not the right thing. And Janine Cummins, and afterwards in her book, talks about her struggle to try to decide, should I be writing this book? Maybe somebody browner than me should be telling the story, which is really ironic because there are literally dozens of books. I've listed some of them on Twitter and various threads that I've done. There are dozens of books written by Mexicans and Mexican Americans about the immigrant experience, about narco violence and fleeing that, and La Bestia.
And as you, David, and as you wrote in one of your many Medium columns, I encourage people to check out Medium. David's been sort of chronicling his thoughts about this process over the last week in several blogs, is that she, quote unquote, leans heavily into the source material. And for folks that listen to the Latino, and I encourage people to listen to this week's Latino USA episode that not only interviewed Luis Alberto Uria, who's one of the people that apparently she leaned heavily into his material about those struggles, as well as interviewed Janine herself and other people related to the story. Yeah, which is a whole other conversation. And
we won't have it. Don't worry.
You guys will have. Well, we could. We just don't have the time right now. But the one of the things that came out of reading your blogs today and thinking about this issue is this idea that, and we just referenced it, that one of the frustrations I would imagine as a Latino creative or a diverse creative person is that there's almost this assumption that we're supposed to write about not only our lives or our perspective or our pain for a non-Latino audience, basically the audience of who the major publishing houses target, which are the more white and more affluent. Yeah. So can you talk about that? Because the reality is that, and I talk about this in a political context all the time, is that we can have our disagreements politically, but the one thing that you're not going to do is you're not going to downplay my humanity and my place in this country because of my background. So can you talk about that this being part of that struggle around telling our story authentically and telling it on our own terms of how we want to share it, and not just for some elite audience?
Yeah, no, I mean, we take a look at like the development of a Latinx body of American literature, which really doesn't get started until in earnest until the early 70s with the publication of things like Tomás Rivera's Y No Se Lo Trago la Tierra and Bless Me Ultima by Rudy Anaya and things like that. Even during the flowering of like Chicano Latinx literature in the 90s, it was still difficult to tell anything other than the stories that made the white readership feel good about having empathy for these people that were in such dire straits. And people who didn't write that kind of a story, who didn't write a story of struggle and despair and then kind of like sticking together, and often there would be some kind of elderly white person that would help out a little bit. If you weren't telling that kind of story that foregrounded your pain, then it wasn't, you didn't get through the gate. People say, this doesn't feel authentic to me. You would have white agents and editors saying that sort of thing. We weren't allowed, and to some extent still are not allowed very often, to write just fun stories, stories full of adventure, stories full of, wonder and fantasy and science fiction and so forth. Like, we're supposed to write about hardship because there is an audience for that hardship, and the publishing world sees that as something that sells, and they don't trust us to tell stories that are not about that, that people will want to consume. But what we've seen, of course, in recent years is a move away from that. In the last 10 years, you have an explosion of fantasy and science fiction, especially in the young adult world, written by Latinx. But it feels really weird that Janine, the story that she finally decides to tell, is once again a story full of violence and despair and just ratcheting up the tension so that people can just kind of like just delight in the tears of brown people and feel at the end. I mean, nobody is consciously thinking, ooh, I get to, devour the pain of brown people. But at the end of the day, the kind of self-congratulatory woke feeling that progressive white people walk away from this book with, that's a drug. It makes them feel like they've done something. Like, oh my God, I read this. I feel empathy. And it's not just white people, progressives in general. I mean, Oprah Winfrey, when she was talking about her selection of the book, which, as I said, the fix was in from the very beginning. But what she said was, and all the stories I've heard about Central American and Mexican immigrants, this is the first one that really made me open my heart and mind. And I'm like, woman, it's a made-up story told really poorly, full of stereotypes, and that's the story that reached you?
Yeah, when I was
what does that say about you?
Yeah, when I was reading, and a Slender Butter from Twitter is putting the hands over her face emoji and a heart. She's feeling your pain for sure.
Yeah.
We're talking to David Bowles here about the Dignidad Literaria movement. So, David, I guess where do we go from here? Because on some level, one of the things that, and this is why I do the show, is that we have to create our own platforms, whether that's in supporting our artists. So for those that say, well, the major publishing houses, we need to develop our own outlets. Why is it so important? There was even a guy on Periscope here saying, maybe it's not as big a thing as they're making it out to be. So what's sort of the next step here? I know we have this campaign I want you to share some thoughts about, but in general, how do we deal with this issue of diversity in the publishing world?
Right. In general, like I'd like to see us pivot away from Janine Cummins and American Dirt. I mean, it spurred this conversation, but what we need to be doing now is working with the big 5 publishers, many of whom, frankly, to be honest with you, and I'm not just saying this because I've got books coming out from HarperCollins and Penguin Random House, but those two especially, and one of the others as well, they have done work. They have created imprints that are specifically for writers of color. They are doing a lot to bring in more and more people of color to work in the editorial side of the thing, but they still have a long way to go. And I feel like we're not moving fast enough. What needs to happen is we need to have a sea change in the publishing industry. We need to have people say, we're going to start dismantling some of the things that we've been doing. We're going to stop this floating a bunch of like mediocre titles on the backs of one major big thing that we're going to invest money in, and we're going to invest it a little more equitably. We're going to try to bring in a diverse cross-section of books. One of the things that I keep talking about is with the money that they paid Janine Cummins to write to publish American Dirt, she'd already written it when they paid her. They could have paid 40 different Latina writers $25,000 each for a manuscript, and we'd have 40 freaking books written by, authentic Latina voices. And I would have preferred to see that. That's the direction we need to go. And I don't believe that creating our own platforms and self-publishing and indie publishing are the answer. We can't just allow for all the power to remain in the hands of an industry that's 90% white, because no matter how strong our little indie publishers are, we're never going to be able to compete with the money and power they have. That's where the transformation needs to happen. We need to force it to happen.
And you're listening to David Bowles, author, activist, talking about the American Dirt drama that's taking place. It's kind of been a blessing in disguise in some ways, because it's brought around this movement of hashtag Dignidad Literaria that's really kind of focusing a lot of our attention on how do we support Latino authors and diverse voices, not only sort of in broadly speaking in various platforms like podcasting or talk for audio formats, but also not only in the literature, in the social media world, or in the written word, but in the major publishing houses. Tell us about the Dignidad Literaria movement, hashtag movement. How did it come together with your group of creators, and how can we support and elevate the voices of our friends in literature?
Yeah, well, I mean, the people that on Twitter especially were doing a lot of the heavy lifting and try to shepherd people into these conversations, Miriam Gurba, Roberto Lobato, and I, along with some of our allies in Presente.org. That's a great organization that has done some fantastic work in mobilizing signatures and other types of actions against harmful actors in media. We realized that we wanted for people to have a way to collectively continue this conversation beyond the comments on our individual threads. And, Twitter has a great mechanism for that. You create a hashtag, people can then click on the hashtag and see all the conversations that are going on. And so if at the end of the day, what we're asking the publishing world for is literary dignity, treat us with equity, represent us as we're represented in the general population, don't give our stories away without giving a chance for us to tell them ourselves, then what we could do is mobilize people to tell their stories online, to talk about it, to do, to go into public venues and read their stories out loud, to protest maybe some of Janine Cummins' different appearances, mobilize in different ways. And we just wrote up a bunch of suggestions, had my daughter, who is a fantastic artist and activist, create like some quick slides, and we started throwing them up with the hashtag Dignidad Literaria, and people began to use it. This is what we wanted, was for it to be an organic thing, for people to grab it and say, okay, yeah, in my community, we're doing this, and we're going to do it under this hashtag Dignidad Literaria. And it's really blossomed, and people are taking it seriously. It's the kind of organic collective search for change that our parents and our grandparents did pues en la lucha con lo de la agricultura and so forth, with like trying to fight for farm rights and so forth. And that's the model that we want to follow. We're not interested in creating an organization. We don't want to be, top down dictating to people what they should be doing. We want to shepherd it. We want to give people ideas and help them connect with other people. And ultimately, it's got to be something that each community is engaging in. Under the rubric of Dignidad Literaria, just to emphasize to the publishing world, we demand dignity, not just in our socio-political lives, but also in our literary lives.
Absolutely. And listen to David Bowles from the Dignidad Literaria movement, hashtag Dignidad Literaria. It's a tongue twister. David, you're really working my bilingual mouth here on a Thursday night. And we really want to thank you, Miriam Gulba, the rest of your team, because this is such an important topic. I share often on the show is that the terrible, back-to-back natural disasters that have impacted the island of Puerto Rico over the last few years, and we're still dealing with the tremors on the island, with the earthquakes on the southern end of the island. Yeah. And we've chronicled that on the show, is that it really has brought a renewed, within the Puerto Rican community, sort of a renewed sense of not only obviously care for the island, the residents, but this renewed sense of how do we support each other? Yeah. So, this idea that we support our small business owners, we support our friends that are just going for their dreams. And I think it's very important, we got to live the lyrics with this work. So this weekend, I'm going to take my sons to a bookstore to buy some books from Latino authors. I'm going to continue to support, my friends that are doing poetry slams, bring more friends like you that promote your books when you're coming out, because one of the things we can do the publishing world will listen to is if the Latinx community, exercises its buying power, exercises that purchasing power. Yeah. Now, the movie industry hasn't listened to us as much on that, but that's another story.
Which is silly because we made Coco this massive success, and they're still will Latino people go to our movies? And we're like, hello, what did we just do?
And every 3 or 4 years, Power or something comes out. Oh wow, and already stuff works. So, David Bowles from the hashtag Dignidad Literaria movement. Let people know any projects you want to share, and anything else you want to share about your movement, and how we should be supporting you and the rest of your campaign.
Yeah, no, just when you do things like what you're talking about, taking your kid to the bookstore and buying books, take photos of that stuff, tweet it out with the hashtag Dignidad Literaria. Show people, show the world. Latinx people read. We love literature. We have created some of the greatest literature on this planet. We don't need people who don't understand our culture to come in and tell our stories. We're perfectly capable of doing it ourselves. And we've got great stories to tell, and that's what I'd like to see people do. And the events you have, you've got a poetry slam event, live streaming under the hashtag, or share excerpts from it, or just let people know about it so they can get out there. People will be searching through that hashtag on Twitter trying to find good things nearby, and that's what it could be as well, like kind of a clearinghouse for awesome literary events that are going on. I've got a bunch of books coming out this year. I've got a couple of translations of books from Spanish into English from a couple of Mexican authors. I've got a children's book series coming out from HarperCollins this summer called 13th Street.
Good for you, David.
Latino kids. And then I've got 2 graphic novels coming out in the fall that are also based around Latinx identity, Mexican specifically. So just keep it busy. And I think all of us are. We have a lot of creativity and stories to tell. And if the publishing world would just get out of the way and let us do it, then we could really affect change in this country and change hearts and minds and attitudes about us. If the gatekeepers would just get the hell out of the way.
That's a great way to end to end this part of the conversation. David Bowles from author, activist, Dignidad Literaria. We're going to continue to support you. Again, respect to Miriam and the rest of the group, and keep us posted on how we can support this movement and what happens. This book is out now. Janine's not touring. Yeah, so there's a lot of shoes that are still going to drop in the store. They're going to unfold. So.
Yeah. And her next book is going to be about Puerto Rico, so just get ready.
I know. Well, she is a quarter Boricua, but I tried to keep that under wraps. David, brother, let's keep in touch. Thank you so much for joining us.
Will do, Ray.
Welcome back to Found Translation. And that was David Bowles, activist, talking about this incredible controversy that's unfolded at Oprah is in the middle of. Let's get right to my homies. Let's get this always puts a smile on my face for those that know from my podcast career. We had for several years the Latino Sports Talk podcast with friends, sports activists around the country. Got a lot to talk about. Not all of it's happy, but it always puts a smile on my face to bring these guys on air. From the Nuts and Bolts podcast, the Sports Whisperer himself, Monte Perez. Monty, welcome back to Found in Translation, brother.
I got to tell everyone, either you were crazy or you saw something in me, because 3 years ago when I first started writing, you said, hey, man, I love your stuff. You want to start contributing and help us out? And you did a great job by believing in me, so I appreciate it.
Well, Monty, then it turns out, without me knowing, your father was my second boss out of college. He's a wonderful man. Your parents still kicking? What wedding anniversary did they just celebrate recently?
It's funny because my parents got married when they were 17, and they just celebrated their 55th wedding anniversary.
Unbelievable.
I had to make a card in a machine for them because they don't sell 50 wedding anniversary cards anymore.
Unbelievable. God bless those people. So, George, your mother, wonderful people. Monty, I have you can't see us, but I have a very special guest also joining us from the Latino Sports Talk world. We couldn't talk about Kobe Bryant and what's going on in the sports world and how the sports world is impacting all of our lives. The other George Lopez is in the building. George Lopez, welcome back to Found in Translation, brother. It's been too long.
Hey, Ray, it's good to be back on the air with you, brother. How you been?
We're doing good, man. Not as good as when I celebrated my last birthday in L.A. Monty, you missed quite a time. Got to hang out with George and Nisa Leone, Jin Lujan, all my great L.A. buddies. Yeah, so, sometimes what stays in L.A. stays in L.A. So we'll leave it at that. Guys, I got a smile on my face. I'm hanging out with two great friends, and we appreciate, again, people watching live on Facebook, Twitter. You can log into the show, ask some questions. We'll get into these sports topics, which have become bigger than life, unfortunately. So why don't we start with you? Monty, if you don't mind, I'm going to start with George because, George, you are an LA super fan, and I know that there's been a lot of sadness all over the world over this tragedy, but it's hit home in particular, the LA sports family. So why don't we start with, how did you hear about the news about Kobe Bryant and his daughter eventually and seven other souls that we lost on Sunday? And how's it been in LA this week? I know it's been a very sad time.
Well, it's funny. The way I heard about it, I was actually going to a practice with my son, and I was on the phone with someone, a friend of mine, and they were telling me Kobe Bryant was killed in a helicopter crash, and I didn't believe it. Because immediately I went on ESPN's website, and there was nothing posted.
Yep.
And my son pulled up TMZ Sports. He goes, no, it's here. I'm like, no, nothing's posted. It's not true. I went on Sports Talk Radio in LA, and right away the guy's voice was very somber. And he's talking about, we're prepared to talk about LeBron passing Kobe Bryant on the all-time scoring list. And all of a sudden he's like, we come in with this news stories about Kobe Bryant being in a helicopter crash. And I'm like, oh my God, this is true. And all of a sudden it just, like, my heart sunk. And we didn't know all the details. We just knew it was Kobe Bryant and there was other people in the helicopter. And it just, it's like a bad dream you can't wake up from. Like, you can't believe that it's actually true.
Yeah.
And it's been very somber here in LA, and that's an understatement. This has affected, whether you're a Laker fan or not, this has affected everyone in Los Angeles and to some degree.
All over the world. Monty, I want to get you in this conversation. Again, the Sports Whisperers with us from the Nuts and Bolts platform. Much respect to Joe Cardoza and the Nuts and Bolts Sports podcast. Monty, try to put this tragedy in perspective. You have to go back to our parents' generation with Roberto Clemente. Being the closest, an example, but that doesn't really even capture the impact of Kobe's Bryant and his daughter, of course, and the other 7 victims of this tragedy in perspective. So try to put some perspective on this impact from a sports, and really goes well beyond sports, brother.
Well, I think the growing up, my favorite player was Magic Johnson. And I'll never forget when Magic Johnson lost to the Chicago Bulls. He went on national TV, they interviewed him, and he said something that really kind of took me the wrong way. He said, and I quote, "We didn't win, but we got here." And to me, that was the end of Magic Johnson's career, because up until that point, it was championship or bust. Now, just go on Kobe Bryant, who was the most intense competitor other than Michael Jordan. Kobe Bryant's whole mantra was, I'm not only going to beat you on the court, I'm going to break your will. I'm going to go after you until you concede, until I beat you. So the fact that Kobe Bryant, I think Magic Johnson is the greatest Laker of all time. Michael Jordan may be the greatest winner of all time, but Kobe Bryant is probably top 2 or 3 when it comes to just the most competitive person you will ever meet. And, a lot of people want to talk about Kobe Bryant's past and things that have happened to him. We live in a society where we love comeback stories. Mike Tyson, right now, anywhere he goes, gets an ovation. Michael Vick, who was in jail for, killing dogs, dogfighting, has served his time. He's now a broadcaster. He travels around the country and gives speeches about what he did wrong. He's donated money. So for all the people who want to attack Kobe Bryant, I look at Kobe Bryant as, I don't know what happened in Denver. I don't know. But what
None of us know. None of us know.
I do know, he seemed to be at peace with his life, with his 4 daughters and his wife. And other than winning a championship, very few get to leave. People are talking about Tom Brady. Maybe he should have retired after winning his last championship. We saw John Elway do it. Other than winning a championship, scoring 60 points in your last game is the best way to go out ever.
Monty, did you think that, and I'd like to get you, I want to get your thoughts on this, George, from an LA perspective and a daddy perspective. Is that, did you, obviously unexpected, shocking? I mean, that's a big part of it, right? Such a young guy. I mean, he just won an Oscar, this guy, and he just retired from the NBA a few years ago. Is that, and obviously his daughter being, you talk about a tragedy. Those young girls that were also lost in this tragedy, Out the Belly family and others, the pilot and a few other folks, the Miss Mouser, the coach. I mean, I guess I didn't realize how Kobe had penetrated the culture. I knew the Latino piece, and George could speak to that. I knew he had a very big, diverse fan base, and the LA community was so connected to him. But as a father, as an entrepreneur, as a man of the world, Monty, this is one of the biggest sports events ever in our lifetime. I mean, talk to us about how this is an example of how sports is so impactful on our global culture in 2020.
Is that for George or me?
No, for you, then George.
Well, you look at what's going on over in China right now. They're going through a massive virus. They publicize it. I mean, just think 15, 20 years ago, if an NBA player retired, or the NBA more than the NFL, other than soccer, more than baseball, more than NHL, is a global sport.
There's 2 global sports, soccer and basketball. That's right.
I remember Luka Doncic said, and Joel Embiid, Philadelphia 76ers, he said, I got into basketball because I watched Kobe Bryant.
That's right.
We look at Jordan, Magic, and Bird, but the NBA players right now, their Jordan, Magic, and Bird was Kobe Bryant, not only in America, but internationally as well. Kristaps Porzingis said Kobe Bryant was his favorite player of all time.
That's right. George, I was thinking about you all this week, not only the LA connection, and you're such a great sports fan. I mean, this guy's been on national sports trivia shows and won trips to Hawaii. I mean, what a great sports fan you are, brother. But also thinking about you in this, I mean, such a big part of this story is the story of fatherhood and you being one of the great daddies. And I know, you're a boy dad like I am. But such a big part of this story was the loss, not only of life beyond Kobe, his daughter Gianna, these other young women, but just the story of fatherhood. And so talk to us about how that part of the story has impacted you this week.
You want to get to some real quick. You mentioned how you thought of Roberto Clemente and his untimely death in that plane crash. Another one that popped into my head was a sudden loss was Thurman Munson of the Yankees.
Thurman Munson, yeah, late 70s.
But in regards to with Gianna or Gigi, it was kind of numbing when I heard it was Kobe Bryant, but it hit me harder when I heard his 13-year-old daughter was on the helicopter with him. My oldest son, Christian, is 13. And that age just kind of resonated with me. I'm like, and I started thinking they had to know what their last moments were going to be like. They knew they were going down. And I can't imagine what they were thinking. I can only think about how would I be with my son, at that age, or any of my other son or my daughter. And I try to take comfort in knowing that their love, they were showing it with each other. They were bonding. And, Kobe, someone, I think it was Vanessa or someone posted, Kobe was there for her first breath. And unfortunately, he was there for her last breath. And hopefully they knew that their love was never ending for each other, in their final moments.
Yeah, no,
but
George,
it hit me harder as a dad.
Yeah, for sure. George, and then I'll get back to you, Monty. But George, I mean, it's obvious why there'd be a lot of love for Kobe in LA, right? I mean, one of the great. And most of if you're under 35, no worse than the second or third, one of the top 3 or 4 athletes of the last 25, 30 years, and certainly the biggest LA star. But I don't know. I don't think Jordan. I think there's such a deep connection with Kobe in LA. So can you talk about that? Because I don't know. I'm sorry, Tom Brady, Jordan. It's about sports with them, but someone like Kobe, it was deeper.
It was beyond, and it's true in the sense that Magic and Larry Bird saved the NBA, but with the technology, social media advancing worldwide, even more so than Jordan, Kobe became a world phenomenon thanks to social media. I mean, people know who Magic Johnson was, but with social media, the internet, everyone around the world got to see Kobe, and he just transcended the game. And granted, there's never going to be another Jordan. Kobe was the closest if you want to compare the two, but Kobe took his game a different direction as well. So there's never going to be another Kobe Bryant. And he was able to, he had this stigma that he was very standoffish. He was aloof and he didn't want to be around, but he wasn't like that. He actually embraced his community, but I think he did it without the fanfare, without the publicity. And I think that's what he wanted. Now these stories are coming out how he would frequent a restaurant close to his house for 20 years. And the things that he was doing, reaching out to other players, trying to mentor these new players, these rookies. You didn't hear about that, while he was playing. And I think that's part of the greatness of Kobe Bryant. He wasn't looking for fanfare. And he was doing stuff in the same avenue as Magic Johnson after basketball. He was trying to use his competitive drive in business or whatever creative endeavor he was trying to do. Magic did it with business. Kobe was doing it with his creativity. I mean, come on, like you said, right after he retires, he wins an Oscar for a short film.
And let me jump in here, George, and I want to get Monte Perez, the Sports Whisperer and the Nuts and Bolts Sports podcast into the back of this conversation, because Monte, the other person I was thinking a lot this week was you in this conversation, obviously between the sadness, because you're such a big proponent about the importance of leadership and the Mamba mentality. And I know that's one of the things. I don't see Monty there. Did he jumped off? So Monty, if you can hear us or see us, jump back on. So George, let me talk to you, because the Mamba mentality, let's get Monty back on air here, bro.
I'm back.
Okay,
guys.
No, it's all right. No worries. It happens. So talk to us, Monty, because as a former college basketball coach yourself, and one of the things I know you focus on with your sports commentary is the lessons we learn about leadership in sports. So talk to us about the ongoing, what is going to be the lasting legacy of Kobe Bryant and the Mamba mentality, these leadership lessons that he was teaching us on the court, off the court, and in his business life before he passed.
Yeah, I think the amazing thing and I'll be talking with George. He's going to come on my show on Sunday. By the way, George is the most frequent guest on my show. People think that he's stalking me, but I always ask him. He doesn't ask me. So I appreciate George's insight. But going back to Kobe, I think that when he first came in the league, look, he was a teenager. Okay, he was aloof. He was not the most. I think where Kobe transcends, and this is what we talk about. First, he stayed with the Lakers all his life. there were rumors that he wanted to get traded, after the Shaq situation, but he didn't. Okay, he stayed with the Lakers. But we watched Kobe grow up. When he came into the league, he was a 17-year-old kid, very smart guy. He knows 5 languages. He was different. He wasn't, your Allen Iverson. He wasn't your, Stephon Marbury. He was a different cat, man. He was a different guy. And we've seen him over the years grow up right before our eyes. And I said this when he left the NBA. I said, I don't want to see Kobe Bryant announcing games. He's too smart for that. And look what he did, guys. He went out and he won an Oscar. Almost automatically, so many players struggle. Shaq talks about this all the time, how he struggled when he retired to figure out what he wanted to do and what his passion was. It's almost as if Kobe Bryant was like, you know what? That was the first half of my life. This is the second half of my life. And I'm going to take that competitive desire and I'm going to take it to whatever I do. There's a great story that came out when Kobe's daughter first started to play basketball. They played this team and they lost by 40 points. Kobe Bryant said, we're not playing any more games. He hired a coach. They practiced for 4 months. And their first or second game back, they beat the team that they lost to by 40 points by like 60 points. So it just shows you. I mean, I was not a Kobe fan. And the reason why is because I was ignorant, because I grew up a Knicks fan and I couldn't stand Phil Jackson. So when Phil Jackson, because he beat the Knicks. When Phil Jackson went to the Lakers, I grew up, I said, I can't root for them. But like Tom Brady, like Larry Bird at the end of his career, like Kobe, these guys, their legend will grow. I always respected Kobe Bryant because no matter what he did, it was, look, you either give it your all or you don't do it. It's like Yoda, said to Luke. Luke said, I'm going to try. He goes, there is no try, only do. And that was Kobe Bryant.
That's right. And you listen to Sports Whisperer Monte Perez and the other George Lopez, a handsome guy that knows about the sports, George Lopez, on Found in Translation. And it's I often tease the LA guys because I talk about all these athletes, all these celebrities, all these artists that we birthed and have now, sort of let LA foster, from Kobe, Kevin Hart, Will Smith, Mike Piazza back in the days, Mike Trout now out in Anaheim. And, there's such a connection with Philadelphia and LA sports, especially Philadelphia and LA basketball. And one of the things that, similar to you, Monty, growing up as a Sixers fan, Kobe was such an enigma because he was a local guy. And we were happy for him. I remember the stories of him in high school. And I have, one of my Roman Catholic high school is one of the big high school basketball powers. So there's some legendary stuff on YouTube with a guy named Donnie Carr, who played D1 basketball at LaSalle, and him going at it. And just lots of stories of people we're connected with that played ball with him, were associated with him in the basketball community here. Then he proceeds to go to LA and rip our hearts out in that finals and had this adversarial relationship with Philadelphia. But it turns out throughout that time, to your point, George, without much fanfare, he always had a lot of love for Philly. Kept in touch with people in his community, visited a lot of times without letting people know. Then had a great connection to Philadelphia basketball. So while, he certainly had his ups and downs, and, it's been a tough situation because we want to put the incident in Colorado in the right perspective in this. It can be very awkward in sort of recounting, after someone's passed. But at the end of the day, like you guys said, he passed away in peace and certainly took care of business with his family. I want to transition to to the other big sporting event. It's amazing how big basketball and Kobe is because it's really downplayed the Super Bowl leading up to this week. Monty, so we got the Chiefs, the Niners. Oh, Monty's disappeared again. So George, let's start with you, brother. He'll come back.
Okay.
I know even though you're a Rand fan, and I know you had to be a little disappointed how this season played out, but that's another conversation. So Chiefs, 49ers, interesting matchup. You have probably the most well-rounded team in the Niners up against the most dynamic, to me now, the emerging superstar in the sport, Patrick Mahomes. So size up the matchup for people.
Well, I think it's going to be one hell of a game, to be honest with you. Obviously, being a Rams fan, I have no love lost for the 49ers.
Yes.
But I have respect for them. I think, Kyle Shanahan did a tremendous job with that team this year. They probably have the best front seven I've seen in quite a long time.
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to compare them to the 2000 Ravens. I don't think they're that great, but it's been probably the most dominant front seven I've seen in a long time. That being said, if you look towards the end of the season, the quarterbacks that kind of gave San Francisco a little bit of problems were those that can create outside of the pocket. I mean, yes, they held the Ravens to 20 points when they played Baltimore, but Lamar Jackson had a pretty good game against them. Russell Wilson had 2 good games against them. The last game the Rams played against them in San Francisco or Santa Clara, when McVay allowed Goff to roll out of the pocket, he was more effective compared to that first game, and he had a much better game. And you're probably getting the quintessential quarterback who can create outside of the pocket. So that's going to be an interesting matchup. Can they contain him in the pocket? I do think Bosa is fast enough to catch him on the run. It's going to be a great chess matchup.
A kid on a personal level, I can't stand the freaking Trump supporting weasel. But you know, God knows what he's talking about. He gave him Sherman as a teammate, and he gave him a Muslim American who's a hell of a coach. Should have gotten a head coaching job. Saleh as his D coordinator. Monte Perez, Monty, brother, tell people what they should be looking out for Super Bowl Sunday, my man.
Well, I think the major thing here, it's a simple formula, right? I mean, Patrick Mahomes needs to be the best player on the field. See, Jimmy Garoppolo doesn't have to win the game. He just has to manage it. Jimmy Garoppolo threw 8 times against the Green Bay Packers.
That's ridiculous.
So we've been talking about Patrick Mahomes for the past 2 years. We've been talking about it's ready for him to take the league over. How do you beat the 49ers? Well, you look at what Russell Wilson did with less talent. You scramble, you create time, and you stretch the field. Because the 49ers front seven may be one of the best front sevens in the history of football. I know statistically they are. But their back seven, even with Richard Sherman, is not that great. And if Patrick Mahomes can create like he's been doing, I think that it's going to be a high-scoring game, and I think that Patrick Mahomes should win it. There's 2 things here that I want people to remember. One, both of these teams deserve to be here. The 49ers were 8-0 before they had injuries. Okay, they could be 15-1 right now if their guys stayed healthy. 2, Patrick Mahomes missed 3 games, and this team still went 12-4. Both of these teams deserve to be there. The question is, can Andy Reid, both of these coaches in Shanahan and Reid have pressure on them. Andy Reid is one of only a few coaches to take 2 different teams to the Super Bowl. Shanahan was the offensive coordinator when the Atlanta Falcons blew a 28-3 lead in the Super Bowl against the New England Patriots. So there is pressure on both. But other than Vince Lombardi, Andy Reid has the highest winning percentage coming off a bye. It's higher than Sean Payton's. It's higher than Bill Belichick's. You give Andy Reid time to prepare, and I would be shocked if the Kansas City gets the ball first, they don't get a field goal because he's one of the masters, and you know this from following him in Philadelphia, of scripting the first 15 plays.
Absolutely. And it's been 15 years. His return to the Super Bowl with another team after 15 years. No, Dick Vermeils was the only one, another Philly guy. But Monty, you know, when I think about Patrick Mahomes' his moment of history, I think about, a lot of names come to mind. These young gun quarterbacks that become legends or great players that get to Super Bowl. They have that first shot young. Thinking about Dan Marino, and people don't remember. You remember, youngest don't know how good Dan Marino was when he was out of Pitt. I mean, God, he was a gunslinger. Thinking about this moment when he got his first Super Bowl, when a young, dynamic, you talk about the most athletic white man I ever saw back in the days. John Elway got the Super Bowl the first time. You know, these guys have these moments where if they can steal that first one when they're young, or they could get a setback and may not get back to this game for some time, as we saw Dan Marino never got back. So Monty, talk to us about what's at stake for Patrick Mahomes' legacy in this young career already in his first Super Bowl. Monty. Well, George, why don't you take that, man? What's at stake for Patrick Mahomes right now?
Well, you know, you mentioned Dan Marino and John Elway the first time they went to the Super Bowls. A couple things come to mind. One, they were those teams were one-dimensional. They had no running game at all. Two, I mean, Marino ran up against probably one of the best teams ever in the 84 49ers. And let's just face it, that team was so balanced. They were tremendous. And Elway went up against a great New York Giants team. But those teams are one-dimensional. Kansas City can run the ball. There's a big difference. And I'm actually saying look out for Kelsey to have a huge game. If he doesn't have at least 10 catches that game, I'm going to be surprised.
He's a beast, that kid, isn't he?
Oh, Kelsey's a beast. It's a great matchup with the both tight ends, Kittle against Kelsey.
Oh, yeah.
But the difference is Kansas City can run a little bit, and that's going to help the play action. I don't see a lot of naked bootlegs, but there's going to be some play action rollouts. And when you get Mahomes out there, and like Monte said, the secondary for San Francisco may be the weak spot. Look for them to have, Watkins and Hills. They're going to have good games. But I think Kelsey is a big key.
Monty, jump in here. Give us again? I want to get back to this Patrick Mahomes conversation. Talk to us what's at stake for his legacy and this moment for these great quarterbacks in their first Super Bowl when they're young. It's going to be really interesting.
Well, I think Patrick Mahomes is saying all the right things. In the interviews, he said he learned a lot from losing in the AFC Championship game last year. He said the New England Patriots threw things at him in the first half that he hadn't seen. I don't know if you remember earlier this year, typical Jets and their incompetence, they mic'd up Sam Darnold against the New England Patriots, who at the time was letting up like 6 points a game. And Sam Darnold was on the sideline saying, "I'm seeing ghosts," which is, in other words, is you're seeing things that aren't there. I think that Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid are so prepared for this game. Look, they're going against a great defensive team. But I think, I remember this growing up, and you guys will remember this too. In the NBA, okay, there was a time where Michael Jordan couldn't get past the Detroit Pistons. There was a time when the Detroit Pistons couldn't get past the Boston Celtics. They almost got their learning curves. We haven't seen that really in the NFL. Tom Brady right away comes in, he wins a Super Bowl. But
don't talk about that, Monte.
Sometimes you need to lose in order to grow, in order to be like, hey, we're not good enough. Like I said, they were 12-4 with Patrick Mahomes getting injured. The San Francisco 49ers were 8-0 before they got a ton of injured players. So both of these teams are good enough to win. But going back to Mahomes, win or lose, it's not going to affect him. He was raised by a dad who was a Major League Baseball player. He's been around NBA players, NFL players his whole life. He's mature beyond his years. So he has Andy Reid, who's like a father figure and an offensive guru. Patrick Mahomes is perfect for that system. The moment will not be too big for him. Even if they lose, even if he throws 2 interceptions, he has the Brett Favre mentality. I'll get it back. So Patrick Mahomes' legacy is not on this game. He is young, he's growing, and he's going to win a few Super Bowls before it's all said and done.
No, and I'm actually trying to get our Chiefs correspondent is in South Beach having a good time, trying to get him on the line. And Monty, you bring up a good point, because let me tell you something. And Patrick Mahomes has been impressive since day one. Let's be honest about it. But he showed me a lot in that divisional playoff game. They're down 24-0. And on the flip side, when you saw Lamar Jackson just sort of like not knowing what to do, and the Ravens staff not knowing what to do when they were in a similar situation against the Titans, Mahomes showed so much leadership, so much confidence, got his team pumped up, got down the field quickly, and he really almost felt like, kind of as a pessimistic Reid, knowing Reid's history, it's like, Mahomes overcame Reid's choke gene in these situations, because that leadership that he brought to the table was incredible. Monty, let's get your prediction. And anything else like share about the Nuts and Bolts podcast or the Sports Whisperer on Fountain Translation?
Yeah, real quick, you can see my article on nutsandboltsports.com. I have the Chiefs winning 37-33, and you can listen to the full Monty Football Show on Sunday. It's a 2.5-hour special. We have guests all across the country, including George Lopez. He will be joining us Sunday. And just follow me on Twitter, Monte, MONTE, JP231. That's Monte, JP231. And, I write about 2-3 articles a week, NFL, college, NBA, any sport. I also do some political writing for some websites as well. So just follow me on Twitter And, again, I want to thank you so much. Again, you were the first guy on social media who said, hey, man, I like your stuff. So, come help us out and we'll help you out. You've been a tremendous help to me to get my career off the ground. I started 3 years ago, and things have been looking up ever since. So thank you for believing in me. I really appreciate it.
All right, and we have some people in the queue real quick, Monty, before I know you got to run back. Dan, just give us a second. We're going to get on there. We have live from South Beach, the Kansas City Chief Nation Kingdom is in the building. Leo Prieto from South Beach, brother. Check it in.
What's going down, man? What's up?
Oh, my God. Look at all my homies out there in South Beach. George, these Chief fans are something else. Leo, tell people.
Yeah, I don't think he's actually working. It looks like he's having a good time in South Beach.
No, he's absolutely having a good time. Leo, tell us how it is for being a Chief fan after 50 years. You're not even 50 years old. So needless to say, this is the highlight before you know it. Tell us how it is for Chief fans to leave the chilly plains to be down in South Beach having a blast. We're getting ready for your Chiefs on Sunday.
Bro, I tell you, man, we haven't slept much, and we've had a great time, and we are celebrating, man. We've probably done, about 5 interviews today. We were on NFL Network.
I saw you with your Andy Reid about a fathead, brother. Very impressive.
Hey, it's your boy, Andy Reid. Andy Reid, man, Philly boy.
Yeah. Good Mormon boy, for sure. No doubt. He's Southern California guy.
So no, man, we want to win it. We also got a chance to, Mr. Clark Hunt got the chance to sign a couple of commemorative footballs after the show and everything. And, the energy is here, man. The energy is here. We literally we had to come inside because it was so loud.
Where you at, the Clevelander? What location are you at there, brother? Give a shout out. Where are you at right now? The Clevelander? Where are you right now?
Oh, we just left the Clevelander actually because Snoop Dogg's over there right now. It was too loud.
Oh, Snoop's over there. Wow, tough life you got. Monty, we got the Kansas City Chief Spanish language broadcast crew here. You got a question for our Chief guys before you go?
Yeah, my biggest question would be how many times do they hand the ball off this game? I think they got to run at least 15 times just to keep the play action honest and get those linebackers cheating.
I'll let Daniel take that one.
I'd say we'll hand it off to Damian Williams 10 times and then split LaShawn McCoy and Thompson. I say no more than 15 max.
I gotcha.
The screen pass is going to be the biggest part of this game. The secondary is legit with Richard Sherman, but if Kelsey can break off the mid and Hardman splits the safeties, you're going to have Tyreek and the slot receiver wide open in the middle of the field. So it really depends on whether or not that play action or that screen pass takes into place.
I'll tell you what, to get that kind of analysis after the day these brothers have had, because I've been reviewing photos all day, my friends. That's
how we roll, man.
This is a day
you
party
haven't heard
crew.
From Rob yet.
No.
I think Rob wants to say a few words.
Get in here, Rob. Get in here, brother.
What's up, man? What's up, my brother?
My man Galicia. Let me tell you something. This is the man. He has the best Chiefs bus in the whole Midwest, brother. Good man right here. Rob, tell us the keys to the game, brother. You excited?
The keys to the game. Keys to the game is going to be the defense. Everybody's sleeping on our defense, I ain't afraid of Jimmy Garoppolo because you ain't going to shut Mahomes down for the whole game. You're going to have 1 or 2 bad series where you make them punt. That's what I mean by bad. But our defense, they feeling disrespected. They're going to show you that boy Garoppolo down. They ain't going to be able to do anything. They're going to be relying on the defense to score all these defensive touchdowns. And that ain't happening, bro.
I'd say, Galicia, this is a good brother right there. So happy to see you there. I'm going to let Monty go because I know he's got some other commitments. Monty, thank you for joining, brother. And, again, let people know where they can see your and listen to your Super Bowl preview this weekend.
Yeah, 11 o'clock Sunday on nutsandboltsports.com. It's going to be a great show. Like I said, 2.5 hours, guests all over the country, including George Lopez right there. Look how attractive he looks.
I'll tell you, he's a handsome devil. Monty, you're the man, brother. Keep grinding. We'll be in touch soon. And that's Monte Perez. Monte Perez from Nuts and Bolts podcast. Good brother right there. I'm going to bring on – we're going to get back into the Kobe conversation in a second because we're going to bring on to the screen here Daniel McNeal, another Laker fan, George. But let's just good to see you, Daniel. But Daniel, you're a Viking fan.
I know.
George's wife his family's a Viking fan, so there's some interesting synergy there. You got a question for these Chief guys who are literally, these are my homies, literally in South Beach getting ready for this game. You got a question for the Chief Nation, the Kingdom. I'm sorry, the Kingdom.
I guess if I had a question for the Chiefs Nation, what is the player or players that everybody's sleeping on that's going to have a major impact?
Which players are they sleeping on?
Charvarius Ward, hands down. Everybody's giving the Honey Badger the spotlight.
Right.
Our front four on the defense, but Charvarius Ward is that second cornerback that everybody sleeps on. He's hands down the best cornerback in the league that nobody's heard of.
Okay.
There you go.
Good luck.
Leo, I'm going to let you, Rob, and Dan go. Give us a final shout out, a blessing for our Chiefs, Vamos Chiefs family, Chiefs Kingdom. I tell people are like, oh, you're probably
tomorrow morning.
I'm sorry?
We're going to be at
we're going to be on First Take tomorrow morning.
from the Clevelander, so be there live.
Nice. Oh, watch it, brother. Well, you keep sending me those little videos. I'm living vicariously through. Let me tell you something. People are asking me around the country, oh, Ralph, you must be rooting for the Chiefs because Andy Reid. I said, no, I'm rooting for the Chiefs because my Kansas City homies take care of me every time I'm in the Midwest or wherever we're partying around the country. So, I got love for you, Leo and Rob. You guys are a fan with me. Oh, that would be a lot of fun if you would allow me to. Leo, go have fun. We'll hang out later. We'll talk later on social media. So I'll tell you, where else in the country are you getting this kind of access, guys? But I want, before I let you, I'm so glad Daniel McNeal, who's long overdue, a creative, as well as someone that's a great sports fan. We vibe on many levels. There's George Lopez, Laker Nation. So Dan, I know you wanted to share a few words about this loss of Kobe. I know it's impacted us on a lot of levels this week.
Yeah. So, when you lose a player such as Kobe Bryant, 20-year career, 5-year champion, 18 times to All-Star game. The accolades are just absolutely ridiculous. And then what he means to the game of basketball as a whole, it's a void that you can't fill. At least not right now. There's nothing you can do to kind of fill that void. So it's a loss for everybody. It's an opportunity for us to kind of reevaluate the fragility of life, how important family is, just taking the little things with a little bit more importance than we did prior to Kobe and his untimely demise.
Well, there's so many levels. We talked about earlier in the show in fan translation, Daniel, that who knew that Kobe would impact people on so many levels. I was not amazed because of the scope of the tragedy, but how much women were impacted. Women that were big sports fans because of the daughter connection, because of how we viewed Kobe and Vanessa's relationship. Obviously the intermarriage and the love he had for the Latino community is an element of that. Now we took care of her, post the drama from back in the days. So the other thing I wanted to mention is that, and it ties into this conversation because, one of the things that hit me was obviously people took it to heart. And the thing about the Shaquille O'Neal, and if people didn't see him on TNT the other day, that was so touching. And I've been a Shaq guy since the LSU days. I love Shaq. I got so much love for Shaq on a lot of levels, and he's a good brother. Is that I feel like he may have misspoke, but he had said basically like, they were cool. They had already squashed that beef, but not like they talked a lot, and they may not have seen each other in a couple years physically. And I think that's what hurt him. It's like, wow, I didn't take that time to follow up with him, and I think about that with guys like you, and I'm always randomly DMing friends because that's a lesson I want to get out of this experience. Like we can't, tomorrow's not promised. So I know so talk about it from a friendship perspective and keeping ties with our loved ones, brother, because I know that was a big part of this for us.
Yeah, and obviously you and I are friends, and you probably any of my posts, I'll randomly just tweet. You know what? I know I'm a little tough, or sometimes I can give issues or whatever the case may be, but I love y'all. And I'm a big proponent on giving people, the flowers while they can smell them. I know you've heard that adage before.
That's the way to do it, man.
And I don't profess to be perfect. I'm learning how to forgive each and every day. And my father, he's very big on this. He always says, forgiveness is when someone has wronged you, is not for the other person, is really for yourself. It enables you to move on and and really see past someone's mistake or their fault, and they may have hurt you or violated you, and gives you the ability to kind of bypass and move on, and maybe in many cases salvage a relationship that may have went astray.
That's right. George, I know you got to run, but any final thoughts from Laker Nation around Kobe or anything else you wanted to share on Found Translation, George?
You know, it's very touching to see how everyone's supporting not only the Lakers and Vanessa Bryant and the kids, but as well as the outpouring of support for the other people that were on the helicopter, their families.
Yes.
I remember Sunday, a friend of mine had posted, "Let's not forget Kobe wasn't the only one on the helicopter."
Right.
And that was very true. And to see the outpouring of emotions, for the other people. One of the fathers was a baseball coach who's highly regarded here at a local college, Orange Coast College in Orange County. And the way they spoke about him was very touching. And if you drive by Staples Center on their marquee, they'll have, rest in peace, Kobe and Gianna, but they're also naming every single person that was on the helicopter on this unfortunate event. And that's touching. It's great to see that.
Yeah.
And, it's very easy just to focus on Kobe Bryant, but it's very reassuring. It gives me, faith in communities where they're remembering others that weren't famous in this unfortunate event.
That's a good way to put it, George. You can follow the other G Lopez on Twitter at the other G Lopez. Yep. George, appreciate you, brother. It was such a blessing to see you when I was in LA in the fall. And I just hope our paths will cross in person very soon. You know how much love I got for you and the family. So best to the wife and kids, and keep posting those pictures of your kids in youth sports. I know it's a big part of y'all family tradition. So all the best to you, brother. I know you got to run. And Dan, also a big time USC.
Have a good one, brother.
So in the fall, with the college, we get it in with that too with George. So, and that was the other G Lopez. So Dan, I know I reached out to you last minute. So anything else you'd like to share about this moment in history, brother? Kobe, doesn't look like we have a democracy much longer. That's another conversation. So
that's another long conversation.
Very concerned about that, my friend. It's the Senate sort of ceding power, and I guess the one thing I did want to share with our community, and hopefully we'll still have some sort of balance in government in 24 hours. But the thing I will say is that I guess we're talking about the fragility of life, but also like the things you see if you live a fairly long life, which we have, because I'll tell you what, there's always issues. I mean, when we were little kids, we were hiding under desks because of the nuclear threats,
right?
Cold War, and obviously civil rights has waved and ebbed and flowed for centuries. But I never thought that democracy was at stake, Dan, and that's what we're talking about right now.
Right. And it's funny because I was watching something the other day that talked about talent and fame, and how talent, fame, and skill sets. Talent and skill sets have given way to fame, and it's funny with this presidency that we're seeing that live in the flesh. And like you, I'm slightly concerned. I was having a conversation with my wife the other day, and just saying, now it almost sets a precedent. Like political offices is a free fall. If you can get X amount of Twitter people to vote for you, or your Facebook following, or if you do something outlandish or say something outlandish, and it's translating into votes. Now, obviously, I'm making the democratic process, I'm really making it sound simple. There's some other mechanizations that work with it as well, but it's just in terms of how this last almost 4 years have gone, it's just really, really, really interesting.
Yeah, no, and the good news is that while it's going to be much more fragile than it's going to get much more fragile likely than it is today in a day or two.
Right.
But the good news is that even though cross our fingers it'll stay, there'll be credibility in it, but we do have a chance to save our democracy in November.
We do.
That's literally where we're at. I mean, that's literally the stakes here. And so we're going to continue to chronicle that. Daniel, anything else you want to share, man? I know it's been a long time coming to be on the show. This will not be the last time for sure.
No, not at all. No, only thing I have to say is, especially in lieu of the Kobe situation, just, hug your loved ones a little bit tighter. Be thankful for the little things. Be thankful for the small gifts that you get each and every day. and just continue living life to the fullest. That's all I want to say.
Absolutely, and have appreciated. I think for the most part, there's always some dumbness, but for the most part, I think it's people have been not only supportive and have really seen the bigger picture here with the other families that George talked about, with focusing on Gianna, focusing on Vanessa, focusing on the things that matter, the conversation around Black fatherhood and girl dad, and there's a lot of which I think has mostly been positive. And you know what, Kobe, for all that, he came in our lives as a basketball player, but he left us with a lot more than just sports memories. That's for sure. There's no question about it. Dan, tell people about your artistic work and anything else about this. Promote your work, man. We're here to support each other.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, my obviously I'm Dan McNeal. I am co-founder and co-creator of Kid Monster Creations, which is a comic book company that was founded by myself and my partner Charlie Fab Gobill. He serves as the art director for all of the work. He does all of the comic books. Our initial comic book that we start off with is called Corsairs. It's available at Kablam. You can just put that in Google and it'll come up. The book Corsairs was basically inspired about the Somalian pirate situation. We saw that their story was being portrayed in one way on TV, but we knew that these people were acting out of defense because their lands were being overfished. The sailors would come on land and do despicable things with the women, diseases being spread. So we wanted to kind of tell their side of the story, but not necessarily beat you over the head with it, but give you a little bit of insight on what was going on and mix in a little bit of the Robin Hood mythos as well. All of our stuff is available online. You literally, because I have a dozen Twitter and Facebook, the best way to do is just really hit Google, put Kid Monster Creations, and everything that we do comes up, from merch to the comic books to our upcoming projects that we're working on as well.
Well, that is awesome, and we're definitely going to continue to support you, Dan, Kid Monster Creations. It's up here on the Chiron now, so we really appreciate you and not only your friendship with me, but my brother and the rest of our family. Michael Koyas always comes up on these shows one way or another. Well, Dan,
him next week. Next week,
fantastic, fantastic. So it's definitely much love to the fam in North Jersey. Dan, appreciate you, man. Your Lakers, despite the loss. Off the court, on the court, you're going to be something to reckon with here for the next few months, and we'll keep talking about that and enjoy the Super Bowl.
Can I say one last thing?
Absolutely.
My last thing is the Clippers are in trouble because the Lakers is going to win this one for Kobe.
You know what?
The battery's in their back. The battery's in their back. The Clippers are in trouble.
I didn't even think about the sports part of it, but you're right. That puts another. You talk about the intensity of those playoff games. Imagine, I just want to see the Lakers and Clippers play each other in the playoffs. That's all I want.
Yes.
Because that would be, I mean, the intensity of that building. And I don't know if you've been to the Staples Center. I've been. No, I've never been. LA Live, that whole environment where you saw the fans. I mean, the energy in that area is unbelievable. Next time we're on here, I'll tell you the story about how I ended up running into Money Mayweather in front of Staples Center a few years back. It's really interesting. Paul George was involved. It was very strange. But anyhow, Dan McNeal from Kid Monster Creations. Thank you, my friend. We'll be in touch. You're always part of the family. And thank you all for watching and listening to the Found Translation Talk Show. We would appreciate if you subscribe either on YouTube or subscribe to the podcast. Anywhere, download a podcast. Continue the conversation on social media at FIT_talk show. Thank you, Dan. We'll be in touch.
Talk to you later.
Talk to you later.